Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. So a few episodes ago, we had the pleasure of hearing from Wayne Chang, who's one of the most prolific and successful young entrepreneurs out of Silicon Valley. And as I got to know Wayne, I discovered that he was a part of an organization called Ivy. Now, I found that there are only two things that can instantly and radically change your life and your business for the better. And those two things are new knowledge and new people. Now, knowledge is more readily available today than it's ever been, but creating and building quality relationships with quality people has remained a challenge. So in 2011, Barry Merrick decided to tackle that problem through the creation of Ivy.com. Now, Ivy is a private and cultivated community of individuals around the world who are united by their desire to make the world a better place. Each week, dozens of Ivy events are held throughout the world with curriculums focused on the arts, entrepreneurship, policy, well-being, and social impact. And they include speakers such as the CEO of GE, Jack Welch, or actors Daniel Radcliffe and Hugh Jackman, astronaut Jose Hernandez, Harvard professors, and entrepreneurs like Wayne. Now, here's what I found fascinating about Ivy and what Barry has created. The business is founded upon the power of creating community through shared experiences and events. So get this. This year, Ivy will hold over 1,000 local events across dozens of cities. That's around 3 events per day, 7 days a week, and all of them in inspiring venues with amazing people. So how in the world is that possible? In my experience, holding a single event is a significant undertaking and usually ends up costing more money than it makes, which is frankly a horrible way to build a business. And yet it's one of the most powerful brand building activities that you can undertake. So how is this done? How is Ivy holding 1,000 events per year logistically and financially? And most importantly, how can your business benefit from building community through events? Well, today we're going to find out the answers to those questions and more. So please help me welcome Barry Merrick. This week's recommended resource is StoryBrand.com. StoryBrand was founded by Don Miller and is designed to help business owners clarify their message to market, which is the very first step that I have always taught in my books and courses as well, because it is so critical to get right. I love everything that they're doing. They have a fantastic podcast as well, and I think you will benefit from their work greatly. So check out StoryBrand.com. Welcome back, everybody. Mike Dillard here, and I would like to introduce to you an entrepreneur who's a very kindred spirit of mine, who has a very similar mission in life, and we're going about it in two somewhat different ways. Mr. Barry Merrick, the founder of Ivy. Barry, thanks so much for joining us here today on Self-Made Man.
It's great to be here, Mike.
Absolutely. So I heard about yourself and Ivy through a mutual friend of ours named Joshua, and he has become a huge fan of what you're doing of Ivy. I believe he was at one of your events recently in New York and just came back from that a glowing fan. And we're going to get into the story of what Ivy is and how you started it here in just a minute. But to sum it up, really, as y'all's mission statement on your website, the point is to unite rising leaders through a lifetime of learning, growth, and impact. Your mission is to unlock potential and spark a new renaissance in promoting human unity, progress, and fulfillment. And I absolutely resonate with that. It's very similar to my mission in life. So if you could, let's dive into your story as really an entrepreneur and what inspired you to start Ivy.
Absolutely. So I was originally born in Istanbul, Turkey, and at a young age, at 11 years old, my family moved to Glasgow, Scotland. And this was a huge shift. It was a totally different culture. And when I moved, I didn't even speak the language there. And I had to adapt to a whole new culture that was very different from mine. And it made me reflect very heavily from a young age on what community means, what drives society, what gets people to do what they do, and how the world works. So I got really into studying all kinds of different things, but specifically history was always my favorite. And the more I studied history, the more I was amazed by the fact that the individuals who had the biggest impact were often the ones you would have never expected to be successful based on where they came from. Many of them came from very little or almost nothing at all. But these individuals who literally made history often had certain qualities in common, and that fascinated me. So this was kind of like the backdrop of what started influencing my mind. I also grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. As part of that, as you well know, that meant a lot of ups and downs, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of big wins, and a lot of like unexpected challenges. But from the earliest memories I have, my father would always ask me in the car, even like I think when I was 4 or 5 years old, so what do you want to do with your life? So that was always important to me. And I love the way in which entrepreneurship provides an incredible ability to individuals to bring together different people, different resources, and mobilize them and rally them towards a specific mission. And if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur, it means that you need to be really good at fulfilling the needs that other people have. So I actually found that to be a very noble thing. As far as professions go, I believe every profession is noble, and that to be successful, you always need to be catering to other people very successfully. And what I loved about entrepreneurship is that it's a real no limits type of profession or a way of living. It really has, in my view, very little to do with your own personal resources or skills. It's much more to do with your ability to bring people together and mobilize them and rally them towards a common cause. So these were like the building blocks of me growing up. I was very fortunate to get to study in the United States for undergrad at Brown University. After that, I worked at Morgan Stanley doing mergers and acquisitions and strategy. And following that, again, I was very fortunate to come back to the States for grad school, this time to Harvard Business School. And these two experiences at Brown University and Harvard Business School were incredibly formative for me. I was completely blown away first time around at Brown, which has a very liberal arts education, where this extremely strong sense of community existed there, where everybody had applied, they had done really well in high school to get there. And they all had very different dreams, and they all were focused on very different areas. But it was an environment that, in an incredibly like non-competitive way, everybody was dreaming very big, wanted to do great things, but everybody was looking to do different things and learning from each other. So I loved that kind of an environment, but I didn't fully appreciate it until I went off to work full-time for a few years. And when I came back to grad school, to Harvard Business School, that's when I really got to reflect on the incredible difference between when you're in a collegiate environment with a strong sense of community versus when you're out in what they call, I guess, the real world, where you're very focused on your work and life is very compartmentalized. So to be very specific, the key realization for me and my co-founder, Philip Treble, who was a classmate of mine at Harvard Business School and a very good friend, the key realization was when there is a sense of community, like in college, where you're every week meeting lots of new people, where every week you're learning lots of new things and you're constantly reflecting on what you want to do with your life and meeting the individuals who can help you achieve those things, both professionally but also in your personal life as well. There was something very special about that collegiate community and what it offered. And I had to constantly ask myself, if people thrive when there is community and it brings the best out of them, it gets them to dream bigger and do more, then why does that community get best served in a collegiate setting, and why does it end when you're young at the age of, let's say, 21, or if you go to grad school at 25 or 30 or what have you? So Ivy has been our way of figuring out a way to make that collegiate experience for life. So that's why we call Ivy the world's first social university. And like you said, we're this community now. It's been almost 4 years since we've launched. We're now in 7 cities with 20,000 members. And everything we do is for one thing. It's all about unlocking the potential of our members and enabling them to unlock the potential of their respective communities and the world at large. So it's been an incredible experience, and I'm excited to share all the lessons from it.
So going through and getting to know, more about Ivy and the events that you guys put on. You have over 500 events hosted per year throughout those 7 cities. You guys put a lot of time and effort into this. The types of events you put on, the caliber, from the staff, the decor, the venues, it's just world class. That's a lot. What was your vision when you started this and you started to put down on paper, with your co-founder, what you wanted Ivy to look like?
Certainly. So I think, as with all ventures, as with all concepts, at the beginning it starts really with a sentence or two. I mean, that's the real spark that starts it all. So initially, the whole idea, which has never changed, has always been to create a community of inspired individuals who are looking to make a positive impact on the world. And then the big question mark was, well, how do you go about doing that? And at the beginning, it really wasn't clear. So I knew how universities did it. They have a campus and a degree program, and top universities have billions of dollars in endowment and top faculty and so forth. But it obviously was not very clear to us how to do it without any of that, how to also do it without the history and the decades or centuries that universities take to cultivate their communities and alumni networks. So we started with the fundamental belief that ultimately it all comes down to the individuals. So the campus, the degree programs, the exams and so forth, those are truly secondary. I really do believe that the key at the heart of any community or network or organization or team are the individuals involved. So the way we started initially was to launch a website that clearly articulated what our mission was. And then we started reaching out to the people that we found inspiring. And we told them what our mission was, to unite the next generation of leading minds and bring together rising leaders in a way that unlocks potential. And we told each person that we'd love them to be a part of it. And we'd love to also introduce them to everybody else in the community. So that's how it started. And that's how we got our first few hundred members, where it was much more web-based, where, more like a social network at the outset, where people had their profiles. They were all very interesting backgrounds, and we digitally introduced them to each other. At the same time, early on, we hosted some events here and there, and our thought was, well, these people are really great. It makes sense to bring them together in person because there's way too much like digital things going on and not enough anymore face-to-face, multidimensional, like a friendly environment. And when you think back to college, the last thing you think is the time you spent online digitally exchanging emails or on Facebook or what have you. You really think about all the experiences you had in person, whether that's learning or socializing or learning more about jobs and careers and applying for jobs. All of that happened much more face-to-face. So we started hosting these events, and they were very successful from even the first event. It was packed. It was a very good vibe. Everybody was extremely welcoming and warm. And I believe that all happened because we were very clear with our mission, which was very positive and supportive. And nobody would have really joined Ivy if they didn't, in the first place, believe on those things. So when you bring together a group of people who believe in the same things, who want to make a positive impact, and when you say the purpose of the gathering is precisely that, then of course, you like the people bring the environment, they create the environment. So the decor and the logistics, all of that, I believe, is really secondary to the individuals that are involved. When we saw the success of the events, we said, okay, we got to do these more regularly. So initially it used to be one cocktail party once a month where everybody would get to know each other. That quickly expanded to one event every 2 weeks, then an event every single week, and then a whole wide variety of formats. So speaking events, dinners, theater, symphony, opera, international trips, workshops, and pretty much anything you can think about as far as like an inspiring experience goes. We do all of that at Ivy now. And we also grew out of our headquarters city, the first city of New York, to Washington, D.C. and Boston, and then launched in LA, San Francisco, Chicago, and Miami. And we'll soon launch in London, Hong Kong, Dubai, and we plan to be in 50 cities. And all of our cities now have at least one event a week. In New York, we have more like 3 to 4 events a week. And in all cities, we're expanding more and more what we can do. But at the outset, truly, it was all about the people. And then we continuously listened to what they thought would be cool, what kind of experiences. And we kept listening to our members, kept giving them what they wanted. And built a team that is extremely creative, talented, tasteful, but most of all also very, very driven and believes highly in the mission and shares the passion of the members for the community. So all of that altogether enabled us to get there. Happy to dive in more into any aspect of that you'd like.
Yeah, no, that's great. I couldn't agree with you more on the mission aspect. Every time I've launched a business that was centered around a grand mission, if you will, everything else just automatically falls in place and it just comes to you. So it's really neat to see that you had the same experience here as well. I'm absolutely convinced that's the single best way to build a business these days and to launch one is around a mission. That's awesome. What has been the biggest challenge so far in growing this network and holding all of these events and opening up new cities?
Well, there are tremendous challenges, and most of those arise from the fact that we are doing something new. There are many organizations that host lots of events. There are many organizations that have great digital platforms, many organizations that have great online content. But I believe there are very few that are truly trying to create that lifelong social university that gives this truly multidimensional social, professional, intellectual, cultural exposure that's very high touch, as you called it. So a lot of the challenge comes from inventing the model. There's no blueprint as to how much Ivy should do, how engaged Ivy members should be, how long they should be, how much they should take to be involved with. I mean, all of those things are undefined. So we are playing this incredible experiment together with our amazing members to really figure out where can this go and what is the full potential here. Like you just alluded to, I mean, the key thing is that the mission, the central core mission, is always the same. How we deliver on it is the big experiment that Ivy has been undertaking over the last 4 years. So specifically, if I had to define one challenge, it's definitely like defining what is the product. And the more we do and the more we believe we've defined it, we realize there's so much more we could be doing. And a lot of time that realization comes from the fact that members tell us very clearly what they're looking for. And whenever they like something, they want more of it. And they constantly have new ideas for what to do. So a big challenge is balancing that desire to do everything with the incredible importance of staying focused and being really good at the things that we do. So over the next few years and decades, my belief is that we will do everything that a top university would do, but a lot better and lifelong. And that's a lot of things, by the way. So for now, the challenge is like really just making sure to take it in appropriate steps and prioritizing. And I do believe the ultimate challenge in any business is just deciding, what is the key priority for that day, week, month, quarter, and year. So that's really the key challenge.
Do you have a methodology or a process that you use for determining that?
Yeah, I believe so. I always like to iterate always between, let's say, a grand goal and then the bottoms up approach. And I think that iteration is really key. So we just talked about what the grand mission of Ivy is, which is very lofty and there are no limits to it. But then you have to bring it down to, okay, well, if that's ultimately where we want to get to, what can we do this year to get there? And specifically what I've done, because that concept of product market fit, when it's a brand new product, when there isn't someone out there that you can just copy in terms of what you should charge, what you should offer, when you're inventing that, I think what has really helped me is to say, what do I want my financial goal to be? So what will it take for the business to offer a lot more to our members, let's say this coming year? What do we need to produce financially? And then you have this numerical goal to hit, let's say for the year. And then I decide, okay, well, to hit that goal, what do we then need to produce each month? And how do we want the growth to be? So you can decide, I'm just hypothetical example, let's say you want your revenues to be twice as large in a given year because you want to provide twice or better value to your members and you want the product to be twice as good. Then, you set that financial goal, you work it to the months, and the numbers keep you really honest and essentially balancing your expenditures with all the things that you're experimenting with to make your customers more happy and fulfilled. So essentially, in short, I set a financial goal, and then that then enables me to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to hit those numbers? And then what freedom and flexibility do I have to experiment with all kinds of new things that don't necessarily generate revenue from the get-go, but can enable the community and the venture to get to the next level the following year. So there's the quantitative financial goal, then there's all the qualitative goals, and iterating between them enables me to set priorities, and then I break them down into what I want to happen in the next year, and then what does that mean for each month. And then I actually do further break it down into weeks, especially the quantifiable goals, so that you have a real indicator, leading indicator of results from a financial perspective. And as long as you're hitting the numbers, it gives you the freedom then to experiment with all the other things that don't produce an immediate financial return.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, backwards engineering tends to work wonders. One of the things that really stands out about Ivy to me is the quality and care of the brand that you're building, down to the experiences, the venues that you have. You guys have, arts and cultural outings, theaters and museums, symphony performances, fashion shows. And I find that personally, always inspiring when someone takes things to the highest level, which I think you guys are doing. And I'm curious how you describe what your vision is to your team. Like, hey, let's have an event in, Austin or New York or wherever. What are how are you describing your vision for the event, the quality of the venue that you're looking for, and just all of that? Because I think that's just a huge part of your brand, but I'm having trouble really kind of articulating how you would communicate that.
Oh, okay. Great question. So the thing is, while all those different event formats you described come across very different, right? A film screening, a fashion show, a museum tour, and a trip to Cuba probably sound like completely different, right? But again, going back to what I was saying before, what they all have in common, especially with Ivy, it's not about the experience per se as much as it is about who you're experiencing with. And everything that while our experiences are very different, what they always have in common is a sense of community. Everybody there are people who have bought into this concept and mission. They're all about creating a better world. So that creates the environment. So what we have to do consistently, no matter what the event format is to make sure that we cultivate an environment that provides a sense of cohesion for our members. So no matter what we're doing, it's a cohesive, welcoming environment where you're with these other awesome individuals and everybody has a story, and those stories have an opportunity to be communicated very clearly so that these new relationships between our members can be sparked. The content within the events helps also, facilitate conversation, helps facilitate also people getting inspired, dreaming bigger, and finding new ways to be more engaged with the world and taking on new pursuits. So, for example, let's say it's a speaking event that we hosted recently with the Oscar-winning producer Brian Grazer, who won an Oscar for The Beautiful Mind and produced films like Apollo 13 and many others. So when Ivy members go to an event like that, it's always a venue, like it's like a formula that we follow. Like the venue has to be top notch and conducive to conversation and conducive also to elevated interaction. So we love high ceilings. We love airy, spacey environments with windows. All those things make a difference to how people feel when they're interacting with each other. The opposite of that would be like a club in the basement of a building where it's like darker and harder to hear people and see each other. So that kind of thinking is important, and it never changes no matter what the event format is. We look for that. We try to make it as interactive as possible. We always give members an opportunity to connect before and after the content piece. And during the content piece, so let's say with Brian Grazer, there's the Q&A. So there'd be the Q&A with him for 20 or 30 minutes that's moderated by a moderator. But then the rest of it for 30 minutes would be an audience discussion. And then after that, Brian Grazer would go and meet all of our members and meet them in person. And then once he leaves, members get to connect more and have an ability to also pursue other opportunities with the speaker. So whether that's a speaking event, whether, again, that's like a dinner or whether it's a symphony, a lot of times it's the same thing. So how are people interacting before and after the content, and how is the content best delivered? In terms of how we go about then, planning it, I mean, it does seem crazy. By the way, in 2017, we will have more than 1,000 experiences across the country and across the world. But going from that 500 to 1,000 is not as big a challenge at all, actually, as it is for us, finding for members to connect better, let's say, outside of events, which we can get to perhaps in the upcoming questions. But in terms of the calendar of experiences, we always listen to our members, whatever they love the most. We try to think, okay, for each city, how often do we want to provide that experience? In which neighborhoods of the city do we want to provide it? And then we set it in a theoretical events calendar. And then our events team goes ahead and programs every single one of those. And then our community team goes ahead and invites our members to engage with them. And through that engagement, we get a lot of feedback, which then helps us continuously shape and better refine our offering to what our members want.
Yeah, I would actually love to dive into, the details around that, because there's a couple of questions circling around in my head. I've got a lot of entrepreneurial friends who host events. Usually they're annual, at a big hotel venue type of, 3-day event. And the common theme out of all of those is no matter what they charge, they end up either making no money and breaking even or losing money. So, an event, I've held a couple, can easily turn into just an endless money pit as far as expenses goes and all of that stuff. So how do you guys handle the practical budgeting means, if you will, of holding 1,000 events a year?
Absolutely happy to dive into that. And while I will be as practical as possible before that, I think it's really important also to tie back to what we've mentioned several times now, which is the importance of the mission. Because ultimately, the mission has never been events. The mission has never been to have profitable events. The mission has always been bring people together in a way that unlocks potential. And I believe that is what has enabled us to scale events to the extent that we have, because what's been underlying it wasn't endeavor to figure out, how do we make events financially lucrative? Quite the contrary, we were always focused on how do we provide experiences that enable people to connect at a truly deep, multidimensional level where they can become friends, business associates, and thought partners all at the same time, the way that you get in colleges. So because we focused on that, initially we had zero budget for events. So we had an amazing crowd, and we would tell venues who had amazing venues and great founders or great CEOs. We tell them our mission. We tell them what we're looking to do. We tell them who we're bringing. And if anything, venues, not just want this crowd, but oftentimes this is the kind of crowd they would pay to have and be exposed to. So I believe, the way we've approached events was, again, through the sense of community. So we showcase an amazing venue. We showcase their founder and CEO. We really get them to be a part of the community. From the get-go, again, many other organizations that have also a learning mission, for example, they have their physical brick and mortar space. So Ivy has never had that. We don't have our own campus or building. We turn and transform the entire city that we're in into a campus. So whatever the best venues are, whatever the best cultural institutions or think tanks are, that's where we bring our community to life. And we're able to do that in a way that, makes financial sense, because we bring such a good crowd, and because what the mission is, and because the venues that we host with and the providers that we have for our events are all bought into the mission also. And it's a very win-win situation because they want the exposure and our members want to experience their venues. And what Ivy is doing is really introducing our members to the venues and, the different components that make up an event. And that's what enables us to really make this work.
No, that's awesome. Brilliant. From a hosting side, do you have essentially hosts for all of these events in the different cities that you guys are located in, or do you fly your team in? How does that work?
Yeah, so today in all of our 7 cities, we have local teams, and truly the teams are an absolutely crucial part of the entire community. They're the true facilitators of helping connect those dots, because you can have the best events on the best web platform, best content in the world, but in the end, nothing will ever, I think, change the importance of human touch, of somebody introducing you to the people you should meet in person or by email, but like because they know each of you. So we have our community managers who facilitate these introductions, and they're on the ground. They're a huge, close part, a key part of the whole community. They know all of our members in person. I should also mention that we interview all of our members one-on-one before they join Ivy. So we take it extremely seriously. I don't think not even all colleges do that, but we take it very, very seriously that, that everyone who's joining is inspired, is positive, community oriented, and, not obnoxious or arrogant, but much more, again, a collaborative, community minded individual. So it starts with the interview to getting to know the members process. And for that to happen effectively, it's absolutely critical that we have a robust, strong team on the ground that gets to know every single member, but our community managers also become like a friend, a colleague, an advisor, all these things to our members. So a critical perk of membership is the local teams that our members have access to. For interest to those listening, I would say though that when we first launched, we did actually have our team in New York City, and we flew or took a bus or train to the other cities when we first started getting going, because again, we were bootstrapped. We had zero budgets for anything. So we really did whatever we could to keep costs light. And as soon as a city had a critical mass of members, that's when we hired the first community manager, then the second and third and so forth. So it was a much more of a grassroots organic building process. I personally went to the first several hundred events, Ivy events in all of our cities. So there was a time where I was in 5 cities every single week. And I know every single venue we've hosted at in all cities. I've met the first few hundred members personally in every city, and I continue to visit all of them now. At some point, it became untenable because there are now multiple events happening every day across multiple cities. So it's no longer possible for one person to do it. But initially, we did start ground up. So for those listening and thinking, oh, yeah, of course, it's nice to have local teams, but that costs a lot of money. I would highly recommend thinking about it in an organic, step-by-step way. So, flying in until, you can afford to recruit locally. And then the recruits actually always more than pay for themselves because they help cultivate a much stronger community much faster and much more effectively. So, but to bridge that gap in between, definitely traveling to the different cities was critical in our launch.
That's awesome. I'm sitting here wondering how in the world you guys manage all of that. And just from a project management standpoint, did y'all have to build your own software platform to keep everything organized? Or do you use, let's say, a Basecamp or something similar to that?
I mean, at the beginning, we started with, just Google Docs, right? It was not sophisticated to start with. But over time, and there were no kind of out of the bag solutions for what we were doing initially. So at the start, there's a big difference between when you're figuring out what it is that you're actually even trying to do. And then once you figure it out, obviously there's a lot of solutions to help optimize. So for a long time, it was Google Docs and, Asana and, software like that for management. Recently, we've invested in Salesforce for CRM purposes to make engagement and communication much more efficient with the member base and also in between the team. The team also uses Slack very heavily. I should mention, although this is very new, we're more than 80 people now and we'll be 100 very soon. So our team is getting larger, but last year we were 30 people and the year before that we were 8. So we grew without raising too much money, but we did so, I think, because we were very lean and efficient in everything that we use and I think effective. So we were in 5 cities, for example, when we only had 2 events people executing events. So again, I think it goes back to that point of, we developed the software and so forth in-house and methodologies, but we did it first by experimenting with how leanly can we do this? What is the absolute minimum number of individuals you need to execute? And once you figure out the things that work, that's when we hired. So when we hire new people, it's most often because we're looking to scale something that already works. And then we're constantly figuring out ways to make it better. But there are certain things, for example, I don't think there are many other ventures or companies that host as many things as we do in the diversity that it has. So we have our own systems that we built in-house to also help manage that as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, next year, 3 events a day, 7 days a week, basically, is just amazing. So I'm curious, you guys are going through a huge growth curve. What has been your biggest weakness that this company has shown a light on, and how have you, gone about remedying that?
The biggest weakness
for you personally, what's been the most challenging part about this personally? For me, my biggest weakness has always been budgeting and money management, because I don't like to think about that stuff. But it's a necessary evil in my mind for growing a business that I've had to come to terms with. So has there been a moment like that for you as well?
The hardest thing by far is just the balancing the priorities and balancing optimizing what already works versus doing all the new things that you absolutely have to do, and just trying to balance like basically the new versus the tried and tested and working. So I'm extremely ADD as a person. So I love a blank page. I love always like new initiatives, new everything. So clearly, had I not focused myself on Ivy and literally given up everything else in my life, as far as like professional pursuits, I would have been too distracted to build anything. But what Ivy has enabled me to do and my team to do is to put all of our interests and everything we're passionate about under one roof. And similarly for our members as well. So the great thing about that is that I'm able to be extremely creative. I'm able to constantly do new things and come up with new ways in which to achieve this mission. But the negative part of it is that, we're never ever fully optimizing anything that we already do fully, because we're also very busy doing the next set of things. And I believe, it's all about balance in life. It's probably not what I'm best at, balance. I always, want to really achieve as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and also in the highest quality way possible. But clearly, there are trade-offs to be made. So I think that has been the biggest challenge where, it's just not, how do you make sure that you're keeping that balance right? Like, how do you make sure the new things are not actually really disrupting the prior things that already work that can be very good for the business? So
yeah, you sound like an entrepreneur.
Yes, I'm sure it's not unique, but that really is the biggest challenge.
Cool. Yeah, that I can absolutely relate to that. You have something that you want to execute, you execute on it, and there's the inflection point. Do you add, some extra cycles to perfecting that, or do you move on to the next thing that you want to bring into the business? And it's a never-ending compromise in that regard that's really tough to deal with. So, yeah, absolutely get it. As far as, joining Ivy goes and what membership looks like, who are you looking for? Who should consider joining Ivy, and how does that work?
We are looking for individuals who truly believe that it is possible to make a lasting impact on the world, that each individual has the potential to make a real lasting difference. We're looking for anyone who believes in that is welcome at Ivy. So that's the most important thing I'd like to start with. Currently, the average member is 31 years old. And just until a few weeks ago, that I was also 31. So it just follows, like we started there because that's kind of what we knew. The range is, most members are between 25 to 45, with average on 31. But like I said, I want this to be a lifetime membership. So over time, that average age will evolve and the age range will grow. So we definitely welcome everyone who believes in the mission to apply. The process is very straightforward. It takes a few minutes online to submit an initial application to Ivy. Once that has been received by the team, we have a membership committee that goes through all the applications. And then, if we need more information or anything, we ask for that. If the application has all the information and the kind of requirements we're looking for, then we schedule an interview with every single applicant. Many of these take place face-to-face. Many of them also take place over a video call or a phone call. And in these interviews, we really explore what drives the person in terms of what are their ultimate goals, both personally and professionally. What have they done so far to achieve those goals? what do they need to do next, specifically like in the next year or two to get closer to those goals, how Ivy can help them achieve those goals, and how they could contribute to the Ivy community. So that's kind of the general structure of getting to know the member, and then obviously telling them much more about what Ivy does. If there is a mutual fit after this interview, then a prospective member becomes a member, and we welcome them at a new member welcome reception. And then they get invited to everything that we offer. They get access to ivy.com, which is our digital platform, which enables them to connect with all of our members. Once you're a member, you have access to everything we do in all of our cities. You also get access to our team. So we have our community managers helping to introduce you to everyone and also helping to promote your endeavors. So if you're publishing a book, producing a film, if you have a venture, there's a not-for-profit that you really care about, our team actively then helps introduce you to individuals and also promote these in general, whether it's through Ivy Magazine, through ivy.com, and so forth. So there's a lot that members can do themselves to, again, get introduced to individuals or showcase their endeavors, but also our team does that heavily. And then the events are the true melting pots of Ivy. That's where people come together face-to-face in person. And like I said, in every city, there's at least one event every week, and many cities have multiple events per week now. So you get invited to all of those.
Now, what if you're not in one of your premier core, venues, those 7 cities? Like, for example, I know you mentioned Austin's, next on your list for expansion. What would someone like myself who's in Austin do in the meantime?
I mean, you can certainly still benefit tremendously from Ivy. We don't actively recruit members in the cities that we haven't launched in yet, because when we do launch there, we want people to get the full experience. At the same time, though, someone like yourself, for example, any entrepreneurs, any artists, any innovators in general, it's a great way to essentially, again, showcase your endeavors to this amazing community of 20,000 members across the country. You can access all the events if you're traveling to those cities, but most importantly, you have anyways access to the web platform and the Ivy team. So in whichever ways we are able to help you in whatever is most important to you in a given month or quarter or year, we do that in any case, regardless of which city you're in. And a lot of other things that we host, for example, when we already host South by Southwest in Austin, and members from all of our cities and all the members who are not in any of our cities come to those things. Similarly with our trips to Iceland, our trips to Cuba, our trips to Paris, all of these things are kind of independent of which city you live in. So there's still a lot to be gained. The key difference of being in a city where we have launched are those, weekly events that you get invited to above and beyond all these other benefits.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I have to say, Barry, this has been really mind expanding for me. Just seeing and hearing how you guys have scaled an event-based community is just amazing. And I just think it's awesome. Your mission's fantastic, and what you guys are doing, I'm just a huge fan of. So, one, thank you for that. And, your contribution that you're making to the world, it's been awesome. And thank you for taking the time here today to share your insights with the Self-Made Man community. Where can everyone go to obviously learn more about Ivy? That's pretty easy, ivy.com. But where can they go to learn more about you and to connect with you as well?
You can email me. Anyone can email me. I'm very responsive at barry@ivy.com. That's BERI@ivy.com. That's the best way to get in touch. And I'm in all of our cities frequently. So if people are living in those cities, I'd love to meet with you also at our events when those events take place. Happy to always meet in person. Also grab a coffee as well. I also want to thank you, Mike, for hosting me today. It was a huge pleasure, and I'm a huge fan of what you've created, and hope to support you in everywhere I can in the future.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to meet you here at South by. I assume you'll be swinging down for that, but I live right downtown, so that's definitely on the agenda for sure.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Barry. Thank you guys so much for joining us once again here on Self-Made Man, and we'll see you next week. Take care.